What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? So we're here today with World War II Oversimplified part number 2. Now, part number 1, we learned a little bit of history here and there, and obviously part 2, they alluded to having a much bigger focus now on America. America, the big game player, the big game changer. They came in and basically dominated. One little project, one little Manhattan project, and boom. Nobody could stop them. They, the imitation game, basically. How did it all start? Well, intercepted. Messages intercepted. And then you kind of just start propaganda, and it kind of just goes up from there. So let's see what part 2, ladies and gentlemen, has in store for us. And let us see where the story heads. It's another 15 minutes, 16 minutes long video. So this one is obviously quite long as well. But it is what it is, Also, before we start, settings. 1080. Let's do it. But yeah, besides that, let us hop right in. As always, I'll be leaving the sponsorship thing at the beginning that they always have. I'll be leaving that the way it is because, quite frankly, they made the video. So go check out their video as well because they put the time and effort into making this video. I'm just here giving a commentary / reacting to it. So that's what it is.
This video was made possible by Skillshare, an online learning community. Stick around until the end of the video to learn how you can get an exclusive deal just for Oversimplified viewers.
There you go. Part 2.
So what else is happening? Well, when I said Britain was all alone, that wasn't entirely true.
America.
Many Commonwealth nations and other allied colonies had joined the war in Britain's support. They would play a key role throughout the war, particularly in the African and Italian campaigns. On the Axis side, Germany, Italy, and Japan signed a defensive tripartite pact, bringing their military lines even closer together.
Alright.
The Soviet Union's war against Finland should have been an easy victory, but it became a humiliating struggle, and their military ineptitude was put on full display. In the end, they did force the Finns to sue for peace. Then, they continued their honorable campaign of pushing around much smaller countries by annexing the Baltic states and part of northern Romania. France's colonies in equatorial Africa were like, heck no, we aren't going to join the Germans, and they all pledged their allegiance to free France, except for Gabon, which had to be taken by military force. The Allies also tried to strategic.
They're going fast right now.
That ended in failure. Mussolini had seen Hitler's successes, and he thought now it was Italy's time to shine. So he tried to
I'm going to have to pause it a few times because they're going really fast. I can't even take in the information that quickly.
British Somaliland, and that went pretty well. Then he tried to take Egypt, and that went less well. Then he tried to take Greece, and that went really badly. Churchill began referring to Italy as Europe's soft underbelly.
Great. Undermine him too.
He began favoring a military campaign from the south and started sending British troops to Greece. All of this had Hitler pretty concerned, and he moved to protect his southern flank. He had been getting friendly with Hungary and twisted their arm into signing the Tripartite Pact and joining the Axis powers. Romania was also eager to join for protection against the Soviet Union. The Tripartite Pact was designed to prevent any other countries from deciding to join the Allies. Specifically, Britain's ally, the pesky United States of America. When the war first broke out, American public opinion...
Yeah, you can clearly see here, I'm pretty sure they're about to go into it, but you can clearly see here, no war. America back then was largely, I can't say larger. I mean, even today, America nowadays is still a population that has a lot of people that have Germanic roots, and they wouldn't want to go to war against Germany. That's kind of the big theme of World War I as well. So World War II is no different. So there was a whole "don't go to war." There was a slogan as well, "Stay for peace, don't go to..." something like that. I don't know the exact slogan that was, but I saw a few banners that had a sign saying I didn't personally see it, obviously I'm not that old, but I saw some banners on I think it was a textbook or something where it's stay at home, don't go to war. It's well, okay there. Okay then, America. That's completely different than from nowadays where it's go to war, go to war. How times have changed.
Was strongly against joining in. In 1940, there was an election. The Republican candidate said, "I will not send any young Americans to die in Europe." And sitting President Franklin D. Roosevelt said, "I will also not send any young Americans to die in Europe. Unless I have to, then I might." And Roosevelt won. Churchill asked him to join the war, but Roosevelt said, "No can do, Winston. But you know what? Here, have some weapons." America began supplying the Allies with food and munitions, but there was one problem. German U-boats were sinking thousands of Allied supply ships in the Atlantic, including American ones. If the Germans could sever Britain's supply line, the UK would starve. Throughout the war, the Allies had to come up with better technology to fight the U-boats.
Imitation game.
Radar, aircraft with longer range, better weaponry and convoy tactics. At one point, a man even called a meeting and said, "Pykrete. You take some wood, you take some ice, you put them together, you get pykrete." And then he pulled out a gun and shot some wood and it shattered. And then he shot some pykrete and the bullet ricocheted off it and hit someone else in the conference room.
Yeah, no.
Then
Yeah,
they
no.
the Pikecrete aircraft carrier, but that idea was scrapped.
Wait, really? This is not a troll like they usually are. This is actually. No, 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 no. Project Really now? Project Habbakuk was a plan by the British during the Second World War to construct an aircraft carrier out of picrete for use against German U-boats. Well, okay, okay. That's the first I've ever heard of that, and that is very, very fascinating. To be totally honest, never would have thought that would. Never in my life would have thought that would be a thing.
Really dumb idea. In the end, Alan Turing and his team of codebreakers cracked Germany's Enigma code, and the U-boats gradually became less and less of a threat. Back in Africa, Britain decided to push Italy out of Egypt. Hey, that was pretty easy, so they kept going. Hitler realized he was going to have to finally step in and do something. He went to Bulgaria and Yugoslavia and said, hey, I'm going to move troops through you to get to Greece, so either join us or, be invaded. Bulgaria opted to join them. Yugoslavia opted to be invaded. Then Greece finally fell to the joint German-Italian invasion.
Yeah.
The British had moved troops from North Africa to fight in Greece, which helped Rommel and his tank divisions push the British back to Egypt. And they could have kept going, but a small, mostly Australian force held out under siege for 8 months into Brooke, denying
Let's go Australia.
strategic port city and disrupting their supply line.
Let's
Despite
go
having some
Australia.
success in the Middle East, the British didn't seem like any real threat for now. Hey, Soviet Union, look out! With 3 million troops, Hitler launched the largest ground invasion in history, and Stalin was far from ready. Both Churchill and Roosevelt had warned him of an impending attack, but he dug his head in the sand, and the Soviets didn't stand a chance.
And here it goes. Hitler's biggest mistake. A lot of people say that's his biggest mistake in the war. This right here. The invasion of Russia. Let's push on. But it's so cold. Let's push on, let's push on. And then you lose. And then they get ready, and then, you don't take the capital. You're like that far away, and then ultimately, that's how you make an enemy out of Russia. A reinforced Russia. Good luck with that. A lot of people say this is like his biggest mistake in the war. I'm not qualified enough to give an accurate assumption whether it is or not. From what we've learned so far, there's a lot of mistakes. There's a lot of good things, but a lot of mistakes as well, so we'll see.
Germany made staggering progress, with huge encircling movements capturing mind-boggling numbers of Russian troops. 250,000 at Bialystok, Minsk, 300,000 at Smolensk, nearly 700,000 at Kiev, and again at Vyazma and Bryansk. Leningrad was put under a siege that would last an insufferable 4 years.
Yeah.
The invasion of Russia had been Hitler's main ideological goal from the beginning, and his hatred for the ethnic peoples there was now unleashed in all its fury. The Eastern Front of the Second World War was brutal for all that endured it. The Germans were now inside of Moscow, and that's it. It's all over. But then it happened.
Take the capital.
Stupid cold. Hitler had hoped the Soviets would give up before winter, but they kept fighting. His commanders came to him and said, can we please dig in for the winter and wait until spring?
No.
Keep going. But oil is literally freezing inside our vehicles.
Keep going.
Fine. Keep going. We're having to leave the corpses of our
Keep going.
by the side of the road so we can still find our way in the snowdrift. Perfectly normal. Keep going. Hitler hadn't given his millions of men winter clothing and supplies, because he thought he really should have won by now. Then, Stalin called in troops from the Siberian front, specially trained to fight in the extreme cold, and the Germans were no match. They were now being pushed back. They had no choice but to dig in and wait for winter to end.
It's like whenever someone tries to invade Russia, alright? Whenever someone really tries to invade Russia, winter. Napoleon, winter. Hitler, winter. It's like, oh my. Well, should have started in summer. Maybe even sooner than that. Should have started like the second one winter ended, and that should have been the moment you started, so you have as much time as possible. But nope. You just have to attack Russia, eh? When it gets cold, eh? Unfortunate.
Staggering, and Japan was eager not to miss the victory bus. Their war in China had come to a standstill, but they wanted to keep expanding their sphere of influence and getting those sweet, sweet raw materials. They began making plans to expand southward, but there was a problem. Southeast Asia was heavily colonized by America and Great Britain. It was also full of ocean. Ocean meant naval combat, and there was no way the Japanese Navy could stand up to the US and the UK.
Yeah.
So they thought, wouldn't it be nice if we could destroy their navies before we begin our conquest? And so it was. On December 7th, 1941, the Japanese launched a surprise air raid on the US Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor.
And this right here was the end. Another trigger to the end, honestly.
And inflicted a huge amount of damage. They also attacked British colonies in Southeast Asia. Roosevelt had no choice but to declare war on Japan, and so did Churchill. Hitler then declared war on America, even though he totally didn't have to. The attack on Pearl Harbor seemed like a big Japanese victory, but they didn't attack any of the naval repair yards, fuel storage tanks, or the submarine base, meaning the Pacific Fleet would be up and running again pretty soon.
And then they'd strike.
The Japanese were able to begin their conquest. They took Guam, the Gilbert Islands, Wake Island, Hong Kong, and the Philippines. They forced Thailand to join them so they could march their troops through to Malaya. They swept through Singapore, North Borneo, the East Indies, New Guinea, the Solomons, and they were now tackling northern Australia and the borders of India. Japan's victory had been as staggering as the Germans, and it reinforced the Japanese idea that this was a divine war which they...
Yeah, but then they got ready to... Then it all went crashing down. It all failed. It's insane how you can conquer so much, but the more you conquer, the harder it gets to keep winning. The less forces you have to really spread out and whatnot, and keep those places. And then it just...
They were destined to win, but their victories had been based on speed, not power, and power would eventually catch up with them.
The A-bomb.
For now, though, in all occupied nations, the people suffered. Persecution, forced labor, harsh punishments for any who spoke out against their occupiers. In Europe, the Nazis were rounding up ethnic minorities and other unwanted groups and individuals. In particular, millions of Jewish people would suffer through the terrible events of the Holocaust. Brave resistance movements rose up in defiance of their invaders, while the people held out for hope. And hope was coming. Winter was over, and Hitler could continue his push eastward. But this time, he switched up his strategy. He wanted to focus on the south. His plan was to cut off the Russian armies in the Caucasus, an area full of oil, and then invade the Caucasus and take all the oil. His forces moved across the north with...
It's always oil.
Hitler got cocky. He rerouted the 4th Panzer Army south early, leaving the 6th Army to complete the encircling movement alone. To do so, the 6th Army had to reach and take the key Soviet city of Stalingrad. The Russians defended it fiercely, and Stalingrad saw some of the harshest fighting of the entire war. The Soviets held off the German advance for 5 months as they battled in the war-torn city, which bought them valuable time. When the Germans had first launched their invasion a year earlier, the Soviets had moved their factories to the east. Those factories had been building a butt-ton of tanks and aircraft, and getting the Soviet army up to scratch. Now, it was ready. Stalin gathered his new and improved forces around the city, and in an attack that resembled Hitler's own encirclement tactics, they began surrounding the 6th Army. Hitler's commanders came to him and said, "Hey, maybe we should retreat." But Hitler said, "No, you stay." The entire 6th Army was trapped and had to surrender. With complete air superiority, the Soviets started pushing westward. For Stalin, it was a resounding victory. For Hitler, an absolute catastrophe. Things also weren't looking too good for Hitler elsewhere. With America now in the war, Allied bombing over German cities reached devastating levels. In Africa, the British had pushed Rommel back again. Then they were pushed back again, and finally, after a decisive battle at El Alamein, and with American and British troops arriving in the west, the Germans and Italians were squeezed out of action. Japan was also already seeing its rapid success being turned around. They attempted to take the island of Midway, but the US Navy was ready for the attack, and they sank Japan's carrier. Actually, they sank a lot of them. It was a battle from which the Japanese Navy would never recover. British, Indian, and Chinese troops held the line in the harsh jungle terrain of Burma, and the Japanese suffered losses in the Solomon Islands and New Guinea. They began...
I'll say this quickly. It's insane how like, from like this victory streak, where both of them are like conquering everything, it can quickly turn into like a losing streak. Where quickly, they can start losing. I'm not saying, America was like the biggest factor. They definitely weren't. All the colonies though, like all the colonies, all the British colonies, they started fighting back. All the American colonies, they started fighting. So it's not just like the main countries, but also their colonies, that are loyal to them or have been previously occupied by them. They're also fighting back. So you just have, it's why, the term World War, you might be thinking, well, there are not that many countries that are involved, but when you just think about the actual scale of all the colonies and everything that was going on, and the size and might of these countries, it's very apt to call it World War. Now, will there ever be a war where like every single nation will fight? I really, really doubt it, because there's never going to be anything where that unites every single nation to fight, unless there was like, honestly, the only scenario I could think of where like every single nation would come together to fight one enemy would be if like there was an extraterrestrial attack. That's the only thing that I could possibly think of, right? But besides that, there is no way that I think every single country would attack, would go to war. I know there's so many treaties nowadays as well that kind of, it's supposed to like help prevent war. Because if you attack one country, you basically attack the whole treaty, and then every country in that treaty will come, and fight in the war. So it's kind of like a deterrent, really. But honestly, I don't think there's ever going to be a time where like every single country in the world is going to fight that. I just don't see that happening ever.
Began to realize they were not invincible. With the Axis out of Africa, the Allies had to decide their next move. Churchill still wanted to attack from the south, while the Americans preferred a full sea invasion in northern France. Alright, said the Americans, we'll do it your way. Allied forces successfully landed in Sicily and began moving north. They also carried out bombing raids over Rome. The thing was, many of the people in Sicily had relatives living in America, and they greeted the American troops quite warmly.
It is I,
With
Luigi.
home territory, most Italians just weren't that into it. And
Okay.
Mussolini was suddenly very unpopular. He was voted out by his own fascist Grand Council and was toppled from power. Italy immediately began negotiations for surrender.
Well.
Hitler wasn't surprised and had already sent reinforcements southward. In an operation he ironically called Operation Axis, German troops quickly disarmed Italian troops in the north. The Allies continued fighting the Germans up through Italy, but then winter set in, meaning mud, and everything slowed to a halt.
Okay.
Alright, said the Americans, let's do it our way as well. Germany had made
Just the
itself known
numbers.
to enemies, and millions of Allied troops had been gathering in England as factories worked around the clock producing the war material needed for a super crazy massive, the likes of which the world has never seen before, invasion of Europe. The Germans knew an Allied invasion would come, but they didn't know where it would land. Thanks to Allied deception tactics, they thought there was a pretty good chance it would come at Calais, but the Allies were really going to land in Normandy because it was less fortified and the beaches were nicer. Under the careful planning of General
Perfect.
Dwight D. Eisenhower, the invasion that had been long in the making was just about ready to go. Just one thing was preventing the launch: the British weather. For a short while, everyone sat around waiting for a decent day, and then
British weather. Well, perfect. For anyone that's ever been to England, for anyone that's ever been here for more than a day, the weather, don't count on it ever. Don't count on it ever. Let me just say this, right? If like 99% of the time it rains. If it doesn't rain, it hails. If it doesn't hail, it rains. And if it doesn't rain, it hails. But like 99% of the time, it rains. That's the best way I can sum it up. That is honestly the best way I can sum the weather up in England. It rains. And rains. And rains. And rains.
it came. On the night of June 5th, over 1,000 bombers took off and raided coastline defenses, while paratroopers were dropped inland in a bit of a chaotic operation, tasked with sabotaging defenses and capturing key bridges to stop any German reinforcements from reaching
There
the
is so much
beaches.
information
Early the next
here that I've never even heard about, which is why I'm really, really happy about learning about it, honestly.
morning, the barrage came, as Allied ships fired a huge number of shells at the German fortifications, and then the landings. The Americans at Utah and Omaha, the British at Golden Sword, and the Canadians at Juneau. It was a tremendous struggle with a great loss of life, particularly at Omaha, but the Allied troops captured the beaches and the landings were a success. Then they began their movements inland. They took the port of Cherbourg and the city of Caen. The Americans moved south to
Slowly
capture
but
Britain.
surely.
Then, in a massive disaster for the Germans, British and Canadian troops from the north and Americans from the south trapped the German 7th Army in a near wipeout encircling movement. In August, Allied troops landed in the south of France to little resistance. On one beach, all they found was a Frenchman handing out champagne. Paris was liberated, and the Germans were pushed out.
See, I can never tell when they're joking or when they're being serious. I'm assuming that was a joke, right? They're not being serious here, right? See, I don't know. That's the difficulty with like these oversimplified videos. They're like, they make so many little quips and so many little jokes that you never know, are they being serious or how they be joking? It's like the pie crate one. It's like, oh, that was actually being serious. Like, who would have guessed that?
France as the Allies entered Belgium. In the Far East, the Allies started to push the Japanese out of Burma. as the Americans launched a two-pronged offensive in the Pacific. In the south, General MacArthur led the push to liberate the Philippines, while General Nimitz oversaw the brutal island-hopping campaign. American forces had to make hard-fought landing after hard-fought landing on fiercely defended small islands as they moved steadily towards the Japanese mainland. The Japanese believed that the greatest thing a person could do was to die in battle, and the most dishonorable act was to surrender. As a result, they fought ferociously to the very end. And the closer...
There is a... Sorry to cut it off here, but there is a thing where, like, after, like, the war, there was, like, many stranded soldiers that, like, you know, that 10, 15, 20 years after the war had ended, they would still continue fighting because they didn't know that the war had ended, because they were, like, in an isolated place, you know, in a stranded island or whatnot. And they basically just kept going, and they couldn't believe that Japan had surrendered. You know, they were like, that's impossible. We would never surrender. You know, all of that was going on. So that's definitely true, you know, about their mentality towards it all, where, like, the greatest, you know, the worst thing one could do, the most shameful thing one could do is surrender.
After the Americans got to the mainland, the more ferocious the resistance became. In February 1945, the Americans captured the island of Iwo Jima, and an intense firebombing campaign of Japan's wooden cities began. The Allies suffered some setbacks trying to liberate the Netherlands, but they were making progress and were now threatening the industrial heartland of Germany. Hitler's health, both mentally and physically, was rapidly deteriorating. Things were looking bad, and he was desperate. He said, "We need to turn this thing around, and I have just the trick. Remember a few years back when we blitzkrieged through the Ardennes and trapped the Allied forces in Belgium? Well, I'm going to do the exact same thing. Again." He gathered his forces and tried to pound them through the Ardennes. He used up the remainder of Germany's strength and resources, and he managed to create quite a nice bulge. He also trapped some American forces in the Belgian town of Bastogne. The Germans sent the trapped Americans a message saying, "Surrender or be annihilated." When it was read out to the commanding officer, he said, "They want to surrender?" "No, sir, they want us to surrender." Nuts! And that's what they sent off as their official reply. General Patton's Third Army then managed to break the siege from the southwest, and the Germans were pushed back. Hitler's last-ditch attempt had failed, and what followed was a total collapse of the German forces. The Allies pushed into Germany from both sides. The Soviet Union took Warsaw and kept pushing to Berlin. In his bunker, Hitler realized all hope was lost. Berlin fell, and with it, Hitler's dreams of a great German empire. Two of the Axis nations had been knocked out.
Only Japan.
The Americans began their assault on Okinawa, the last island before they would reach the Japanese mainland. The desperate Japanese fought hard, launching kamikaze attacks on the U.S. ships. The citizens of Okinawa suffered through the terrible fighting, but in 2 months, the island was captured. The Allies now had to make a choice: either continue the devastating struggle up the Japanese mainland, or they could try to coerce the Japanese into surrendering now. In July, the first successful atomic bomb test took place in New Mexico, and the destructive weapon was ready for use.
And there we go.
America and the UK were also seeing the Soviet Union not so much liberating as occupying its captured territories, and so they wanted to put on a show of force. On August 6th, the A-bomb fell on Hiroshima. Then, on the 9th, Nagasaki. The cities were reduced to rubble, and for the people living there, it was a terrible fate. But for the Allies, it achieved their main aim. In September, the Emperor announced Japan's surrender, saying the war situation has developed not necessarily to Japan's advantage. After 6 years, war was finally over. The Allies occupied Japan for 8 years. The Emperor was allowed to keep his position, but General MacArthur made sure this picture was printed in the Japanese press to display to the Japanese people that their Emperor was not the divine, powerful being they had believed. Germany was divided between America, the UK, France, and the Soviet Union.
See, it was just like that. It almost in that, you know, just like that. You know, it's strange, right? How, like, we can all fight each other, go to war with each other, and then, like, once a nation surrenders, we're all not to say we're all buddy, right? That's obviously not the case. But, like, it just seemed like, oh yeah, okay, the war is over. No, cool. Let's move on. Basically, let's move on to a bright future. Obviously, there are a lot of consequences after the war, you know, but it's still incredible. I find that actually quite incredible. And perhaps it's because, you know, human history is filled with wars. They're like, if we had a grudge against everyone that was in a war, we would basically have a grudge against every single nation. But, like, it's incredible how we can just basically have a war. One country then surrenders or gets defeated, and then from there on, it's just like, yeah, okay, cool. Let's move forward, which I find very admirable, honestly. You know, I don't want to say the ability to forgive, but rather the ability to move on. That's quite good, quite fashionably good, honestly. But for those guys that haven't seen the movie, there's actually a movie that's like recounting Hitler's last moments. I know it's not 100% factual. Obviously, there's some liberties taken with it, but the movie Der Untergang, which was a very fun movie. I remember when I was in secondary school, there was a friend of mine who was like, a history buff basically. Like he knew everything about World War II history, and he would always just quote the movie line. There was a big meme back then with the Hitler Fegelein, Fegelein, Fegelein. Where is Fegelein? It's okay, but that's an old meme, old meme back in those internet days. But yeah, Germany obviously goes down, and then you have the atom bomb, and then Japan surrenders. One after the other, the pieces were falling, and then ultimately, you can't really sustain a battle when everyone's basically against you. Basically, it's just not going to work. In just battles alone, pincer attacks are devastating. So having it in a war, pincer attacks with multiple nations, that's nah, it's not happening.
In 1949, the Allied sectors were united into West Germany. The Second World War had been more terrible and destructive than the First. In its aftermath, two major superpowers with two very different ideologies had come out victorious, and the tension between the two of them would create a new kind of war.
Yeah, the Cold War.
A very, very cold one. Wow, Churchill, that looks just like me. And your app is doing really well.
Is that the sponsorship?
The idea you made is to die for. How'd you learn to do all this stuff? I used the link in the description.
I'll leave that there.
Of Skillshare for just 99 cents. Wow, tell me more. Okay.
I'll leave that there.
Skillshare is an online learning community with more than 19,000 classes in design, business, technology, and
I will say that I have, was it Skillshare? I've used one of those skill websites. There's multiple of them. And they were actually pretty good. I learned exactly what I wanted to learn, which was video editing, Premiere Pro it was, because I used to use Sony Vegas 10, 15 years ago all the time. Maybe not that long ago, I'm not that old. Like 10 years ago all the time. And then I was like, okay, I want to move to Premiere Pro, and then I used one of those websites, and it helped me.
And more.
Only 24, 15 years ago.
Access to high-quality classes taught by genuine experts working in their field, so you can improve your skills, unlock new opportunities, and do the work you love. If you want to learn how to create games, you can check out the courses on using Unity or creating vector art. There are courses for software development, music production, arts and crafts, or if you want to learn how to animate like I do, you can find loads of courses for beginning animation. And Skillshare won't take a heavy toll on your wallet compared to other learning platforms, with an annual subscription being under $10 a month. If you'd like to give it a try first, then I've got a deal just for Oversimplified viewers. The first 1,000 people to use this link, which can also be found in the description, will get their first 2 months of Skillshare for just 99 cents. That's right, just 1 cent short of $1. So be sure to sign up using the link in the description, improve your skills, and learn something new today.
There we go. I'll leave it at that then. What I wanted to say though, World War II, again, probably the major war, eh? And not minor wars, because there's plenty of minor wars that I have no idea about, but the major war that I actually absolutely know nothing about. And this video was very well in depth. Now, I am curious, because there's always this big speculation. Oh, World War III. There was a big thing this year in 2020 that we're gonna have World War III. No, we won't. Even if America were to go to war against North Korea, it wouldn't. It might start some tensions with North Korean allies, but I really very much doubt it would lead to World War III. The nations are very much opposed to starting another war with a superpower. All the big nations, they go to war with any smaller country. They're yeah, fine, we'll go to war. Constantly we have, this country declaring war on this country. It's yeah, they're just doing it because they want to flex some power. That's all it really is. But they're very much opposed, which is why they kind of hinted towards the Cold War. Very much opposed going up against another superpower, because they know exactly what that will mean for both of them. So will there be a World War III anytime soon? I don't think anytime. I think there would have to be something major to happen, maybe even an assassination. I don't think that would get us to a World War III, because then it's very much different than it seemed in the past. I know World War One, the assassination, they blamed it on the government. I don't see that being the case nowadays. People just got to say, oh, he's rogue, oh, he's gone nuts, he's crazy, he's a psychopath, because we have a lot more information about the human mental condition. So I don't think even an assassination would get World War III. I think the one thing that could really start World War III is there's a few things that could do. Maybe like economic struggles, ideological struggle, but I don't see what that would be because we've already had that, political struggle. We've already had all these issues. So I feel like we've kind of gotten smarter about it. So maybe a technological struggle. Now that could definitely lead to a war potentially with there's this whole thing with like the Russians. And when I think of like World War, I think the two countries that are most likely to start it, honestly, are America and Russia. That's why I always have like a look at America, like America, they're doing something. You need to be wary of them. And I always look to Russia and like, how will they retaliate? Because Russia, they're gonna retaliate if they're forced, they will retaliate. So I'm always like looking at both sides, and obviously the UK being right in the middle between like Russia and America. I'm like, shoot, if war starts, shoot, I'm screwed. That's basically the way the way I kind of view it. It's like, shoot. But like maybe like a conspiracy kind of war where like, oh no, they hacked us, they did that, they did this, and then like the American people retaliate or so. I don't know, right? World War III just to me just seems, it just seems, maybe I'm wrong, I'm assuming this, but it just seems like the nations are a lot smarter nowadays and a lot less eager to go to a war, especially against another country that is powerful enough to wipe them out. So who knows? I don't. Most certainly, I don't. But this was a fun video to watch. I'll be seeing you all in the next one, everyone. There's going to be daily videos for starting next week. I don't know when this video should come out, tomorrow. But there's going to be daily videos starting next Monday. That gives me like a little bit of time to like record ahead, and then I can have daily videos maybe every day for the rest of the year. Record a few ahead and then just schedule them. Sounds fascinating. Sounds interesting. I might do that. But regardless though, ladies and gentlemen, I'll be seeing you all in the next one, everyone. Until then, have a nice day. Peace out and bye.